There is a moment, and you have felt it, where the ground beneath you disappears, not metaphorically, not as a figure of speech. You feel it physically. Your chest tightens. Your thoughts scatter in every direction at once. The world keeps moving, but you have stopped. And in that stillness, something inside you begins to crack. Most people never recover from certain moments. Not because those moments were too powerful, but because they were never taught how to meet them. They were handed ambition, but not endurance. They were taught how to pursue success, but never how to stand inside failure. They were shown how to love, but never how to survive loss. And so when these moments come, and they always come, most people collapse. The Stoics knew this. Marcus Aurelius knew this. Epictetus knew this. Seneca knew this. These were not men who theorized about suffering from a comfortable distance. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire while burying children, fighting endless wars, and watching those closest to him betray his trust. Epictetus was a slave. He owned nothing. He controlled nothing, not even his own body. And yet he became one of the most psychologically unshakable human beings who ever lived. Seneca counseled emperors, survived exile, lost fortunes, and faced death with his eyes open. These men did not avoid the moments that destroy people. They walked through them, and they left behind a philosophy, a precise, demanding, and deeply practical philosophy. For how to do the same, this video is about 7 of those moments. The 7 situations that break most people, and what the Stoics actually did. Not what they said, but what they did when those moments arrived. If this kind of content speaks to something in you, if you are someone who wants to think more clearly, live more deliberately, and hold yourself together when everything around you falls apart, then subscribe to Stoic Zeno right now. Hit the like button if you believe this wisdom deserves to be heard by more people. Share this video with someone in your life who is currently walking through one of these moments, and leave a comment below. Tell me which of these 7 moments has been the hardest one for you personally. I read every comment. Now let us begin. The first moment is the moment of public failure, not private failure. Anyone can survive failing quietly, in a room alone, with no witnesses. The kind of failure that destroys people is the kind that happens in front of others. The presentation that falls apart. The business that collapses publicly. The relationship that ends in a way everyone can see. The mistake that becomes the story people tell about you. The moment where your inadequacy is not just known to you, it is known to the room. In that moment, most people do not experience failure. They experience something far worse. They experience the judgment of others layered on top of the failure itself. And that second layer, that perceived verdict from the crowd, from colleagues, from family, from people scrolling through their phones, that is what actually destroys them. Not the event. The audience. Marcus Aurelius wrote something in his Meditations that sounds simple until you sit with it. He wrote, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." Read that again. You love yourself more than you love others, and yet you surrender the governance of your inner life to what those others think of you. You hand the most valuable thing you possess, your peace of mind, to people who, by your own measure, matter less to you than you do to yourself. This is not humility. It is a contradiction, and the Stoics had no patience for contradictions they could resolve. Epictetus was even more direct. He said that people are disturbed not by events, but by the opinions they hold about events. The failure itself, the missed number, the rejected proposal, the public stumble, that is an event. It belongs to the category of things that happen, but the shame, the humiliation, the sense of being permanently diminished in the eyes of others, those are opinions. Your opinions, and opinions, unlike events, can be examined, challenged, and replaced. The Stoic approach to public failure is not to pretend it does not hurt. It is to ask a single question. What actually happened here? Stripped of every story I am telling about it. What is the bare fact? And then to ask, is my response to the bare fact proportional? Or am I responding to a catastrophe I have constructed in my own mind using other people's imagined judgments as the building material? Most people who collapse after public failure are not collapsing under the weight of what happened. They are collapsing under the weight of what they imagined everyone thought about what happened. And that is a structure you built, which means it is a structure you can take apart. The second moment is the moment of sudden loss. Loss arrives in more forms than people prepare for. The death of someone you love. The end of a relationship you believed would last. The job that disappears without warning. The version of your future that was real to you yesterday and does not exist today. Loss is not one thing. It is the disappearance of something your identity had organized itself around. And here is what makes loss so catastrophic for most people. They were living as though the thing could not be taken. They were living with a kind of unconscious certainty. that the person would always be there, that the relationship was permanent, that tomorrow would resemble today. And when that certainty is shattered, it is not just the thing itself that is lost. It is the entire framework of assumptions that the person had been quietly building their life upon. Seneca wrote about this with a precision that is almost clinical. He said, "Omnia aliena sunt, tempus tantum nostrum est." Everything is alien to us. Only time is truly ours, and even time, he argued, must be held lightly. He wrote to his friend Lucilius about the habit of loving things as though they are permanent. He said that the wise person loves everything they have as something borrowed, not with detachment, not without feeling, but with full awareness that the loan may be called in at any moment. This is not a pessimistic way to live. People misread Stoicism on this point constantly. The Stoics were not teaching you to love less. They were teaching you to love honestly, to look at the people and things you love and say, "I know you are temporary. I know this moment is finite, and I am choosing to be fully present inside it anyway." That is not a diminished love. That is a love that has made peace with reality instead of pretending reality is other than it is. Marcus Aurelius lost 8 of his children. He stood at those graves. He carried that grief, and he continued to govern, to think, to write, to serve. Not because he was made of stone, but because he had developed the internal architecture to hold grief without being destroyed by it. He did not perform strength, he built it. The same architecture is available to you. It is built through honest confrontation with the impermanence of everything you hold. Before you are forced to confront it, the third moment is the moment of betrayal. Betrayal is unique among the moments that destroy people because it does not just hurt you. It rewrites the past. When someone betrays your trust, a friend, a partner, a colleague, a family member, you do not just experience the present pain of it. You go back through every memory, every interaction, every moment of vulnerability you shared with that person, and you see it differently. The past is recolored, and this retroactive destruction, the sense that what you believed to be real was never real at all, this is what makes betrayal so uniquely devastating. Most people respond to betrayal by closing. They build walls. They decide that trust itself is the problem, that openness is weakness, that vulnerability is foolishness, and that the only safe position is one of permanent guardedness. And so the betrayal does not just damage one relationship. It damages the person's capacity for relationship itself. That is not a defense. That is a secondary wound, self-inflicted. Epictetus addressed this directly. He said that when you are insulted or harmed by another person, you must first ask, what is this person working from? What is their level of understanding? What is the quality of their inner life? Because a person who betrays you is not doing it to you from a position of strength and clarity. They are doing it from wherever they are. From their fears, their limitations, their failures of character, and those belong to them. They are not a verdict on you. This does not mean betrayal should be accepted or tolerated. The Stoics were not passive. They simply refused to allow someone else's moral failure to become their own psychological destruction. Your anger is understandable. Your pain is legitimate. But converting that pain into a permanent contraction of your character, deciding to become smaller, harder, and less open because of what one person did, that is handing them a victory that extends far beyond the original act. Marcus Aurelius was betrayed by those close to him. People who owed him loyalty, people he had trusted with power, people he had treated with generosity. And his response, written in his private journals for no one but himself, was not bitterness. It was a return to the question, what is the right thing for me to do now? Not what did they do? What do I do? Because the quality of your character is determined by your response to what is done to you, not by what is done to you. The fourth moment is the moment of prolonged uncertainty. This one is less dramatic than the others, and it is arguably more destructive. Because it does not arrive with the sharp shock of a single event. It is a slow accumulation. You are waiting to hear back. You do not know what will happen. The outcome is not in your hands, and the timeline is not yours to control. And the longer the uncertainty stretches, the more your mind fills the empty space with anxiety, with worst-case scenarios, with spiraling projections that feel more real every day. Most people cannot tolerate not knowing. They would rather have a bad answer than no answer. They will force decisions that are not ready to be made. They will exhaust themselves trying to control variables that are not theirs to control. They will turn uncertainty into an emergency, because the mind experiences the unknown as a threat. And a threat, the mind insists, must be resolved immediately. The Stoics identified this very clearly. Epictetus built his entire philosophy on a single foundational distinction. Some things are in our power, some things are not. What is in your power, your thoughts, your responses, your effort, your values, your character. What is not in your power, outcomes, other people's decisions, timing, chance, circumstance. And the cause of almost all human suffering, Epictetus argued, is the failure to honor this distinction. It is the habit of treating things outside your power as though they should respond to your will. Prolonged uncertainty is one of the purest tests of this distinction. Because uncertainty, by definition, means the outcome is not settled. It means you are in the domain of what is not yet in your power, and the only productive question in that domain is, what is within my power right now, in this moment, regardless of how the outcome resolves? Seneca wrote, Dum differter vita transcurrit. While we are waiting, life passes. This was not a call to impatience, it was a call to presence, to recognize that the hours you spend in the paralysis of anxious waiting are real hours from a finite supply, being spent on something that produces nothing. The uncertainty does not resolve faster because you are suffering inside it. But your life, your actual life, passes at exactly the same rate whether you are suffering or not. This is the Stoic practice during prolonged uncertainty. Return to what is yours, your effort, your preparation, your character, your presence in the moments you are actually living. Work with what you have, act on what you can, and release with deliberate intention the demand that the unknown reveal itself on your schedule. The fifth moment is the moment of harsh criticism, not feedback, not the kind of measured, thoughtful input that helps you improve. The kind of criticism that is delivered without care, that is designed to diminish rather than to correct, that lands publicly and with force. The kind that calls your intelligence into question, or your worth, or your right to occupy the space you are standing in. And even more than that, the criticism that comes from people whose opinion you have not asked for, whose judgment you did not invite, and whose understanding of you is shallow at best. The comment, the colleague, the family member who has never built anything telling you exactly what is wrong with what you are trying to build. That kind of criticism. Most people either crumble under this or overcorrect into defensive rage, and both of these responses have the same root. They treat the critic's voice as authoritative. They grant the critic the power to determine value. And in doing so, they hand over their self-governance to someone who may have no legitimate claim to it. Marcus Aurelius asked himself a question that is worth carrying with you. He asked, if someone told you that a certain person had spoken badly of you, what would you say? And his answer, which he wrote for himself alone, was this: they do not know my other faults, or they would have more to say. This is not sarcasm. It is a form of psychological release. It is the recognition that you know yourself more completely than any critic ever will. And from that position of honest self-knowledge, external judgments lose a great deal of their destructive power. Epictetus said something even more fundamental. He said that no one can harm you without your consent. That harm of the psychological kind, the kind that actually damages you, requires your participation. The criticism reaches you. You take it in. You amplify it. You attach it to beliefs you already hold about your inadequacy. You run it through the machinery of your self-doubt and produce at the other end a wound. But the critic did not produce that wound. You did. The critic gave you raw material. You manufactured the damage. This is not comfortable to hear, but it is the most useful thing you can hear because it means the damage is yours to prevent. Not by becoming indifferent to all feedback. Genuine feedback is valuable. But by learning to distinguish between the voice that wants to help you grow and the voice that simply wants to see you small. And then, for the second voice, choosing not to cooperate with the machinery that turns noise into wounds. The sixth moment is the moment when everything changes at once, not gradual change, not the slow evolution of circumstances that allows you to adapt incrementally. The sudden, total rearrangement, the diagnosis that reorganizes everything that comes after it, the collapse of something you had spent years building, the end of a chapter that you did not know was ending. The moment where you look around and the landscape of your life no longer resembles the one you went to sleep in. Sudden change is so destabilizing because human beings are pattern-seeking creatures. You build mental models of reality. This is how things work. This is what I can expect. This is where I stand. And those models give you the ability to plan, to project, to feel a degree of control over your circumstances. So sudden change does not just alter the circumstances, it destroys the model. And without the model, most people experience something close to cognitive paralysis. The map no longer matches the territory, and they do not know how to move without a map. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Loss is nothing else but change, and change is nature's delight." He was not dismissing pain. He was placing change in its proper context. Change is not an interruption of reality. It is the nature of reality. Everything you see, everything you have, every arrangement of your life exists within a system that is defined by impermanence. The Stoics called this the flow of things, the constant movement of matter, circumstance, and time. And the person who has internalized this, who lives not with the assumption of permanence but with an honest understanding of flux, is not shocked by sudden change. They are already oriented toward it. This does not mean you will not feel the impact. Of course you will. But there is a difference between feeling the impact and being undone by it. The Stoic practice in the face of sudden change is to ask immediately, what remains? What is still mine? My ability to think, my ability to choose my response, my values, my character. These do not change when circumstances change. They are the fixed point from which all navigation begins. Seneca wrote that the wise person is never caught off guard because they have already considered all possibilities. Not in a paranoid way, not by living in constant anticipation of disaster, but by maintaining the awareness that the arrangement of today is not guaranteed to be the arrangement of tomorrow, and that awareness held honestly produces not anxiety but readiness. A quiet, grounded readiness that allows you to act when others are still processing the shock. The seventh moment, and this is the one most people never admit to, is the moment of complete isolation, not physical solitude. Many people find peace in physical solitude. The isolation I am describing is something different. It is the moment where you feel fundamentally alone in what you are carrying, where the thing you are going through cannot be fully shared with anyone, where the people around you are present but unreachable, where you look out at the world moving normally, people laughing and planning and complaining about small things, and you feel like a figure behind glass, visible but entirely separated. This moment destroys people not because of the pain itself, but because of what the pain whispers to them inside the isolation. It whispers that this is permanent, that no one understands, that the disconnection you feel is evidence of something fundamentally wrong with you, that you are alone not by circumstance but by nature. And most people in that moment believe it. The Stoics had a very specific answer to this, and it begins with Marcus Aurelius. He spent years at war, away from Rome, away from the philosophical community that sustained him, surrounded by soldiers and strategic necessity and death. And in that isolation he wrote the Meditations, not for publication, not for posterity, for himself. As an act of self-governance in the absence of external support, he was alone. And his response to being alone was to become more fully himself, to use the silence as an opportunity for the only conversation that no isolation can interrupt, the one you have with yourself. Epictetus taught that the internal life is not dependent on external company. Your reason, your capacity to examine your own thoughts, your ability to choose your responses, these function perfectly in isolation. In fact, he argued, they often function better. The noise of social life, the pressure to perform and conform and adapt to the expectations of others. This can muffle the internal voice. Isolation, painful as it is, strips away that noise. And what remains, if you are willing to turn toward it rather than away from it, is you. The actual you. The one that exists beneath all the roles and relationships and external validations. Seneca wrote to Lucilius about the difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is the experience of absence, the awareness of what is missing. Solitude is the experience of presence, the full occupation of your own company. The same physical state can produce either one, depending on where you direct your attention. Most people in isolation direct their attention outward, toward what they have lost, toward who is not there, toward the connection they are missing. The Stoic practice is to direct attention inward, toward what is present, what is intact, what is yours, and to discover, often to their own surprise, that the company of a well-examined mind is not nothing. It is something profound, something that no circumstance can take from you. 7 moments, 7 situations that have ended people, not killed them, ended their courage, ended their openness, ended their willingness to try again, to trust again, to build again, ended the version of themselves that was still growing. The Stoics did not promise that these moments would not come. They offered no protection from the arrival of loss, betrayal, failure, uncertainty, criticism, change, or isolation. What they offered was something more valuable and more durable than protection. They offered a way of standing inside these moments without being defined by them. A set of mental practices so rigorous and so honest that the moments, however heavy, do not become the final word on who you are. Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca. These were not people who lived untouched by difficulty. They were people who refused to let difficulty have the last word, not through denial, not through false positivity, but through the hard, daily, unglamorous work of choosing how to respond, of asking, in the middle of pain, what remains in my power, of returning again and again to the fixed point of their own values, their own reason, their own character. That fixed point is available to you. It has always been available to you. The question is whether you are willing to find it. Not in the calm moments, not when things are going well and it is easy to be philosophical, but precisely in the 7 moments when everything in you is screaming to collapse. That is when it matters. That is when the philosophy either is or it is not. You do not need to be unfeeling. You need to be unshaken. Those are not the same thing. To feel everything and still hold the ground, that is not suppression. That is the full expression of a human being who has taken their own life seriously enough to prepare for it honestly. If this video found you at the right moment, if something here landed in a way you needed, then please like this video. It takes 1 second, and it tells the algorithm that this kind of content deserves to reach more people who need it. Share this video with someone in your life right now who is walking through one of these 7 moments. Sometimes the most important thing you can do for someone is hand them a framework that helps them stand. Subscribe to Stoic Zeno if you are not already part of this community. Every week we go deeper into the Stoic texts, not as historical curiosity, but as working philosophy for actual human lives. And leave a comment below. Tell me which of these 7 moments is the one you find hardest to navigate. Tell me which one you are inside of right now. I read every comment, and your honesty in that space is part of what makes this community worth building. The work is not done when the video ends. The work begins the next time you are standing in one of these moments and you have to decide. In a fraction of a second, with everything in you pulling toward collapse, whether you have built enough of an interior life to hold, build it now while the ground is still steady, because it will not always be.